I'd like to just say a very, very warm welcome and thank you, Minister Anand, for joining us today. I also want to say one quick thing is that, you know, we pretty much thought you would come and do your remarks, and on Sunday night to learn that actually you didn't want to just give remarks, you wanted to have a discussion and have a fireside chat discussion. And on top of that, you didn't want, you know, there's no saying of like, well, exactly what are you going to ask? What are we going to talk about? And I have to say, just as a Canadian and you being an elected official, it goes a long way, and it says a lot. And I think, and I really appreciate that. And I thank you. I thank you for the openness and the reciprocity. So thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Stage alone.
We got 3 people here. No, I'm just kidding.
But I really, really, really wish I was there in person. It just wasn't possible. But let me begin by taking a moment to reflect on the horrific shooting last night in Tumbler Ridge. As Canadians, our ability to come together in times of crisis is, I believe, what binds us together. We grieve with those whose lives have been changed forever. We grieve with loved ones and classmates and friends and teachers who are all suffering today. I've just come from a meeting with my team, and I asked them to take time today to reach out to our community, far and wide, to make sure that we're empathetic. It's really that empathy that binds us all. And of course, recognizing first responders who put themselves in the line of duty each and every day is really something that we are fortunate to have in our country. So thank you for giving me a moment there, Jessica, just to express my deep feelings on this particular day for all who are suffering. Et peut-être je pourrais commencer par dire que l'équipe d'Artic360, non seulement de nous avoir réunis aujourd'hui, mais aussi pour tout le travail que vous faites. C'est très important le travail-là, et nous savons que nous vivons dans un moment charnière pour l'Arctique et pour le Canada. Et j'étais, comme vous savez, dans les pays de Danemark et Groenland, et je vais vous parler un peu de ce que j'y ai entendu. I'll start with a threat that we don't often talk about, and that's climate change. And climate change is transforming the Arctic at an unprecedented pace. And it is, if you will, below the surface sometimes, given the geopolitical environment. But when I landed in Nuuk on Friday morning, Foreign Minister Motzfeldt from the government of Greenland met me, and she remarked that climate change is changing their way of life. We talked about their activities and the activities they do with their children on the ski hills. We also talked about how the ice is used for Indigenous peoples in terms of traveling and hunting. And that way of life is changing and in some cases disappearing. En même temps, nous avons également discuté de comment la concurrence géopolitique redéfinit profondément l'environnement de sécurité. So these two realities are meeting. The environmental degradation as well as the geopolitical environment are coming to a head in Greenland and certainly in the Arctic writ large. Now I want to move and talk about the Arctic as a whole at the front line. And you are well aware in this room that 70% of Canada's coastline interfaces with the Arctic. You are well aware that 40% of Canada's landmass lies in the Arctic. This is a geographical fact. This has not changed. is changing, and I was speaking about this, 5 years ago when I was Minister of National Defense, the Arctic is no longer a low-tension region. It certainly wasn't then, and after the further invasion of Ukraine by Russia, we were very and increasingly concerned about the Arctic. But as I meet with my Nordic counterparts, we see their view also that the Arctic is the front line of strategic competition, and these developments remind us of how quickly the dynamics can shift in the circumpolar world, and why respect for sovereignty, for dialogue, for partnership must remain central. The threats are something hopefully we'll talk about in the Q&A. They are intensifying, and what we need to do is to address the threats, for example, the Russian military, the dual-use infrastructure that is moving further and further north in the Arctic on the other side of the Arctic Circle. When I was Minister of National Defense, it was May 2023 when I announced the modernization of NORAD. Hopefully we'll talk about that as well. But certainly, as we recognize that the threats in the Arctic are increasing, we should not forget the work that we have been doing from a Canadian standpoint to address these threats, including through modernizing NORAD. Now in the foreign policy seat, what I see is the need to strengthen our partnerships, to reinforce Canada's work across the board. And we are seen very much as leaders in this space. The opening of Canada's consulate in Nuuk was a concrete step in advancing Canada's Arctic foreign policy. And while raising the Canadian flag, I reiterated that Canada fully supports the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Kingdom of Denmark and Greenland. The future is theirs alone to determine, and this view stems from Canada's focus on international law and the fact that our strategic interests are at stake. So defending Canada's Arctic sovereignty is an unquestionable national security priority of this government. Not a day goes by where I am not discussing Arctic security and sovereignty. And let me just say, it was one of the reasons I wanted to come here today so badly, is that this issue that you're taking on in ARTIC360 is absolutely central to how we protect Canada and how we contribute to global security writ large. The Arctic is not peripheral to our defense and sovereignty. Et aussi, comme j'ai dit, en tant qu'ancienne ministre de la Défense nationale et maintenant ministre des Affaires étrangères, je constate cette réalité chaque jour. Je vois à quel rythme les menaces évoluent ainsi qu'un intérêt militaire économique croissant pour l'Arctique. I added in the word economic there because we cannot forget that the military and the strategic decisions we are making about protecting the sovereignty and security of the Arctic are really hand in hand with economic considerations and the economic development that we will continue to see, but certainly that is causing other countries to have great interest in the Canadian Arctic from a critical mineral standpoint, from an energy standpoint. And so, whereas historically you might have seen the economy and military interests being siloed, no longer is that the case, as I often discuss, and certainly was on plain view when I was in Washington, D.C. last week at the Critical Minerals Conference. Let me say a little bit more about strategic defense. So you can't defend what you can't see. or what you're not prepared to defend. And this is why, as I alluded to earlier, we are investing in defense and security, and there is a significant focus on the Arctic. So you know that we have committed in the last budget more than $80 billion to strengthening Canada's military and security capabilities. And in addition to the modernization of NORAD in 2023 and our commitment to over-the-horizon radar, for example, we're also building a network of northern operational support hubs across the Arctic designed to meet both military requirements and the needs of northern communities. We're acquiring a fleet of early warning aircraft. Those are going to have enhanced sensor systems paired with them to strengthen domain awareness and detection, rapid response across vast northern distances. We're also moving forward with a new fleet of tactical helicopters. That's ensuring the mobility and the reach in some of the really demanding and difficult conditions in the Arctic. And we're establishing a satellite ground station in the Arctic, which is going to strengthen space-based awareness and secure communications where they matter most. I'm particularly fond of our naval fleet, having been born in Nova Scotia and growing up in the Halifax region. So we're modernizing Canada's naval fleet as well. We're moving forward with contracts for 15 surface combatants. Those contracts are complex and difficult, but we're moving ahead with them. 12 submarines as well, and Arctic and Offshore Patrol 6, in fact, that are being delivered to the Royal Canadian Navy, one of which has circumnavigated the North American continent. So I just wanted to put those on the table because one of the criticisms I see and hear is that, we need to have more of a presence in the Arctic. We need to do more in the Arctic, and this is work that is being done and has been in progress. As I said, some of these procurements are difficult, but they are moving ahead, and we see the tangible results of them. In fact, one of the Coast Guard ships met me in Greenland, in the port of Nuuk. We had a meal on that ship with the broader business community in Nuuk to talk about transportation links with port authorities, with airlines, and with airport authorities as well. So you can see here how military and other procurements really overlap, especially in the Arctic. So they ensure that Canada can detect earlier, move faster, and operate longer at sea, in the air, in space, and under the ice. So what I want to now move to talk about is that we have to focus on another piece of this puzzle, and that's Indigenous and Northern partnership. When I was raising the flag in Nuuk, we were joined by over 100 Inuit and Indigenous peoples who came from Canada, who came from northern communities, especially for that moment, which lasted about half an hour, but it was one of the most poignant moments of my life. To see, in fact, reconciliation in action, but also in my meetings afterwards with Indigenous peoples and Governor General Mary Simon, the need for us to include Indigenous people and northern communities in this policy-making discussion. I don't want to call it a chat. I don't want to call it a conversation. This is Arctic foreign policy and domestic policy at work, and it needs to include Indigenous peoples, Inuit communities. Les peuples autochtones sont des partenaires à part entière de la stratégie arctique du Canada aujourd'hui et pour l'avenir. And this partnership is grounded in our commitment to reconciliation and to the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. They know the land, they know this geographical area, they are the historical owners of this land, and after the flag raising ceremony, when I sat down with them, I reiterated our view that Inuit Nunangat is sovereign and we are here to work together on these initiatives. Let's move now, before I conclude, to say something about NATO, given that I'm a foreign minister and really our work with allies and the international aspects relating to our foreign policy are fundamental, and I hope they'll inform your conversation.
Great.
Canada's role in NATO has historically been one where we export our defense to Europe. We are a founding member of NATO, yes, but we've exported our defense to Europe. It is the moment in time where NATO, as the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, must look north and not only east. We are going to reach NATO's 5% by 2035. You have heard me just now talk about some of the investments, which will include dual-use infrastructure investments. But on the NATO front, I have spoken directly with Secretary General Mark Rutte, as well as our Nordic 5 allies. We all agree that NATO needs to have a Northern and Arctic focus. The question is, how is that going to occur? When is that going to occur? Defending the Arctic is defending NATO's northern flank and defending North America itself. Canada is going to move ahead with defense investments, but we believe that NATO's focus should also be in the Arctic. I've invited Mark Rutte to come to Canada, to come to the Arctic, to have further conversations on this point, but let's be clear, this focus must continue to be on the North, and it will be from a Canadian standpoint, and I am pushing NATO allies and the Secretary General to see this as a collective effort, not only an individual effort. Let me conclude now simply by saying, in his speech at Davos, the Prime Minister said that we must, as middle powers, work together. And we have to make sure that the foundational principles of international law are adhered to. Allied security works best when we respect one another's sovereignty. This work with multilateral partners will continue. Our government will not drift in the face of change, and we will not outsource our sovereignty. That's our priority, that's our collective responsibility, that's the work we are doing every single day. So Jessica, Thank you so much, and happy to take any questions you might have. Perfect.
Well, thank you, and thank you for those excellent remarks. And I think it sets up some of my questions actually quite nicely. You know, you've worn the hat of defense minister, and now you're a minister of foreign affairs, and of course there's like this real intersection between defense and kind of our foreign policy issues. But I want to maybe tease it out a little bit, go a little bit deeper into the weeds. Let's talk just specifically about Global Affairs Canada and foreign policy. I think it's been roundly recognized, understood, appreciated to see that Canada is advancing some of these key pillars of its Arctic foreign policy. It was a really nice, amazing time to see us open a consulate in Nuuk, something that was in discussion for years, and it's very nice to see that come to fruition. We're talking about building or opening our Anchorage consulate. We have a new ambassador, Arctic ambassador, Virginia Mearns, and like you were mentioning, we have a foreign policy that we put together that was co-developed. So there's those pieces, and I just want to ask, there's been we've got fundamental geopolitical change that has taken place since you published the Arctic foreign policy, and I'm just wondering if we might see perhaps like the defense update, an updated Arctic foreign policy on the horizon that might then address the changes, increased strategic cooperation with our Nordic allies, etc.?
You know, I just love the question because it really is so appropriate right now from the work we are doing every day on the ground standpoint, but also in terms of understanding our foreign policy. So let me just unpack a few points in the question. First, your reference to the defense work that I've done and now the foreign policy work that I'm doing. I don't know how you can be a foreign minister today without having done the work in national defense, because our Canadian Armed Forces are doing incredible work for our country and vis-a-vis our international obligations and alliances. And if there's one thing that I learned as Minister of National Defense, it is that the reach of the Canadian Armed Forces, the effort of the forces, the capacity that they have to make positive change in the world should never be underestimated. And so I come to the table with that understanding and having really appreciated the Canadian Armed Forces for everything they do and stand for. That's why that $80 billion that we're investing in national defense, much of it is going to go to the Canadian Armed Forces themselves, is so, so important. Now, moving on to the next part of your question, which relates to our Arctic foreign policy and our work with our Nordic allies in particular. So we are going to be publishing a new foreign policy, but that is going to come after the national security strategy that is going to be the broader umbrella of individual pillars of work that we are doing as a government. So from national defense to immigration to foreign policy, those different pillars will fall under the national security strategy that will be released. And so in the meantime, we have seen and will continue to see updating our Arctic foreign policy in real time. You're right, opening the consulate in Nuuk was part of our foreign policy released in late 2024. But in this moment of geopolitical challenge and change, opening the consulate in Nuuk is also about standing strongly for Arctic cooperation, Arctic security, and the collaboration that we will do with the Nordic Five in particular, as we all share the view that this is collective work and we have to do it together. And so along that line, your next question might be, what are you doing with your Nordic allies? So I went to Finland last August, in fact, to reiterate that Canada is going to continue to take a leadership role in terms of Arctic collaboration and cooperation, that we have to stand together to ensure that we're addressing the threats that are being posed, including as Russian infrastructure moves further and further north towards the Arctic Circle. And we also have to work within traditional alliances, including NATO, to say, look, and this is especially poignant now that Sweden and Finland are members of NATO, look, we all believe that NATO's focus has to be on the North Atlantic and the Arctic as the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. As I said, I've sat down with Mark Rutte a number of times to have this conversation, and he agrees. The next question is, what does that practically mean? We're seeing Operation Arctic Sentry taking shape within the NATO context. We would like to see that initiative be permanent. We are seeing that Canada already has Operation Nanook, which is multilateral in nature. How can we make sure that we have that strength continuous basis in the Arctic? Those are just some of the thoughts on your first question.
Which are excellent, and it was music to my ears to hear be part of a larger national security strategy and bringing everything together. So I really, I'm going to stay then really quickly on foreign affairs, and then I've got one last question that gets back to maybe the NATO discussion. Conventionally, within Global Affairs Canada, the focus on the Arctic has been really kind of very much centered, focused entirely on the Arctic Council, and why the Arctic Council, of course, is a really important means of cooperation. Now that the world's kind of changing, not to undermine anything with the Arctic Council, I'm just asking, can we expect maybe that we'll maybe diversify and do more in other areas, in other forms of soft diplomacy, in terms of bringing business leaders together, working with northern governments, think tanks, these kind of things, to engage in those other kinds of strategic, I would say, soft diplomacy with our Arctic allied neighbors. Oh, we lost your. Hear
me now?
Yep.
If there is one thing that defines our foreign policy at this moment in time, it is that we are operating on multiple routes to address the current geopolitical environment. Where you see us, and me in particular, at NATO, or meeting with my counterparts at the Munich Security Conference or in Washington last week, there is always soft diplomacy occurring. So you will see formal statements of our foreign policy, but it is underpinned by the work we are trying to effect with various stakeholders. And you mentioned the business community as well as impromptu meetings of foreign ministers. The Nordic 5 is now the Nordic 5+1. We are invited frequently to meetings with the Nordic 5 because of our focus on the Arctic. In terms of the business community, as we are planning our engagements abroad, we are constantly thinking not only of those businesses, large and small, that want to do business in foreign jurisdiction, but also the Canadian Maple 8. Our pension fund activity, including in Arctic nations, think about Finland, for example, is second to none. We are known throughout the world for our investments abroad, as well as the welcome to foreign direct investment, which is always on our front burner. I would say that when I got to Global Affairs, I said in my briefing notes, I need economic data. I need information about FDI both ways. I need trade figures and revenues, and I need to be able to raise these issues with my counterparts, because today, in today's environment, as I said, security and economic interests go hand in hand, and it's really my responsibility as Foreign Minister to ensure that those issues are being raised at every turn.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I hope then we can also channel some of that broader energy then towards the Arctic as well. Minister, I have 200 questions I would love to ask you and pick your brain about, but I know that time is running out, and you've got to drink your coffee. Do you get paid for the? Oh, your microphone. Oh, there you go. Okay.
Great. You're having this conference. It's so important at this moment in time. So I'm not going anywhere. You can ask me any number of questions if you have the time.
Today, right now?
Go ahead.
Okay, then I'm in. Because I wanted to circle back. I wanted to circle back with the discussion on NATO, and I'm curious as to how you see Canada best balance. So we have our NORAD cooperation and our commitments there. We clearly want to now strengthen all types of cooperation with Denmark and Greenland, but one piece of that is defense and security. And then there's, you know, our commitment, our relationship, and everything you've talked about in terms of NATO and NATO increasing its attention to the Arctic northern flank. How do you see the best balance then between kind of, and where do you see then the right relationship between, let's say, NORAD and NATO's focused on the north, and yeah, in that context?
So I'm really glad you brought that up, because in these moments where the Canada-US relationship is at times seeing some friction, we have to remember that the NORAD relationship continues to remain strong. That in Colorado, Canadian and American Armed Forces members are working side by side every single day. This is fundamental to the defense and protection of the North American continent. It's fundamental to the purchases of over-the-horizon radar that we are undertaking. It's fundamental to the broad network of aerial surveillance that Canada is actually modernizing and has been doing so since 2023. So that relationship still exists, still functions well, as it should, and it is something that may be overlooked from time to time. We also, in addition to NORAD, really rest our collective defense on the concepts of deterrence and collective defense that are ingrained in the NATO multilateral structure. What we are seeing now within that structure is that countries with distinct interests, like us and the Nordic Five, are layering on top of that multilateral structure discussions about collective interest regionally. And this speaks to the pragmatism that underlies Canadian foreign policy right now. We continue to be committed to our foundational values, collective defense in NATO, NORAD partnership. On top of those alliances, we also have to remember that pragmatism will need us to have additional diplomatic conversations and will drive our foreign policy as well. So it's complicated,
yep.
But it is possible in
yep.
this moment to do this layering.
Okay. I have one last question. I didn't put anything when I submitted some thoughts to you. You know, I'm wondering if we might see, we have a very, traditionally, you know, a defensive posture about our Arctic, right? We're going to defend it from climate change. Now we're seeing it in the defense realm as well. Might we move maybe, possibly, into a shift in terms of, you know, the opportunity that our Arctic does present? We talk a lot about, you know, leadership in AI, robotics, and these frontier technologies. And you know, we often talk about innovating out of the Arctic. And I'm wondering, and then you're talking a lot also about the economic piece to the global affairs portfolio. And I'm wondering if you see, you know, a real opportunity for Canada actually to see this as really our advantage in shining in areas of innovation and cold weather technologies of all sorts.
Because it really incorporates some of the points that I was trying to make, which is Canada's not resting on its back foot and doing the bare minimum, but we're taking a very ambitious stance in our foreign policy and domestic economic policy to say, look, our defense policy domestically, our fulfillment of NATO 5%, which includes the 1.5% that can be spent on dual-use infrastructure, can be the opportunity, not just a response. And the opportunity here is to say, look at the competitive advantages that our incredible country holds. Expertise in technology and AI that we see coming out of our fantastic universities through the pipeline towards commercial endeavors. Critical minerals production and expertise. Energy superpower capabilities. Knowledge of the Arctic and deployment of capabilities, both from a human resource as well as a procurement standpoint. Those are 4 factors in and of themselves that point to the positive trajectory, aggressive trajectory that Canada is now on vis-a-vis the Arctic. And so I say to you and everyone in the audience, similarly, we all must be individually ambitious in our respective fields. Whether you are in the academy, whether you are in business, whether you are in institutional investing, whether you are in exploration, mineral-wise, whether you are a community builder and not-for-profit, we all have a role to play, and we will play that role with the founding peoples of this land, Inuit and Northern communities.
Well, I think that's an excellent way to wrap this up. I honestly, I thank you really so much for, it means a lot. It means a lot to everyone here who's from the North and has put all decades of time and energy on the North to show, it shows how serious that we are taking, that Canada as a government is taking the North and the Arctic and our role in the world as regards that. So thank you so much. I wish you were here, I could shake your hand, but.
Well, I'm not going to come again.
Please.
And we'll be able to in person, and we can have a conversation like this again, where we can perhaps look at the past year and say, what has changed? Have we been able to deliver? Are we ensuring that those capabilities come online, that we're including Indigenous peoples in the discussions, that we've brought the economy and the strategic thinking together in the way we should, and are we at one with our allies in the protection and defense of Canada's North? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.